Sunitha, how are you?
Good, Richard. How are you doing?
Doing so well, and I'm so happy to speak with you today. And we were just chatting for a minute about how we're racing to the end of the year, which is like a little bit mind blowing. How's your to-do list on what you wanted to get done in 2024?
Gosh,
Everything all buttoned up?
yeah, right. It's really a sprint to the end of the year. The to-do list is just getting longer. I'm hoping I can get most of it done in this year, but the rest will have to wait till 2025, given where we are.
Yeah, the way I look at it is if it's nothing that is, gonna like halt the world from turning, it can probably wait until January, right?
Yeah, priorities, priorities.
Priorities. Awesome. Well, thank you. Once again, we're joined by Sunitha Malepati from the Buffalo Initiative, and I am very excited to talk to you about the work that you're doing with the Buffalo Initiative. But Sunitha, before we get into that, you've had a remarkable career, and you did a lot before you kind of became involved in philanthropic initiatives, and maybe you've always been involved in philanthropic, philanthropy and philanthropic initiatives. But I would love to just hear a little bit about your journey, and some of the work that you've done throughout your career, and then certainly talk about how this has shaped your approach to community building and your approach to philanthropy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start even before my career, just starting in childhood, right? So
Mm,
I was raised and lived in a family of immigrant parents. My parents moved to India
mhm,
as physicians to finish their training and then really work in the United States. And they really taught us from a very young age,
mm,
our role and responsibility as human citizens is to
nice,
really
nice,
utilize the skills that you have
right.
to do anything you can to help other people in the world, no
Mm,
matter sort of what sector you're in, what sort of ways that you're going to do that. But really think about what you can offer to other people in your local community, in the sort of global community, and do that. And so we've always been raised with this idea of giving back and
mm,
trying to have that lens of what can I do, what can I
yeah,
contribute. And so that's how I was raised.
that's
My
beautiful.
parents utilize their skill sets as physicians, and they did clinics all over the world. They would take
Mm,
us with them and set up free clinics, like a Doctors Without Borders type of
sure.
mission orientation. And so we saw the world through that lens, and
Mm,
that's how I was raised. And they did that locally as well, in communities across the United States. And we worked at soup kitchens
wow.
and just did a lot of volunteering growing up. And so when I went through, I was going through my education, that framework was always kind of in my mind.
Yeah.
And after I graduated from college, I started working in different nonprofits. I did a little bit of healthcare consulting, but the bulk of my career before I went to law school was around in an organization called Living Cities, which is a
Okay.
philanthropic collaborative. It's still around
Hmm.
today. 22 of the largest foundations and financial institutions were collaborating and
Mm,
figuring out how to be effective in improving community economic development opportunities in urban areas across the United States. And
right.
I really got kind of thrust into the sort of social entrepreneurship mindset and social venture mindset through my work and leadership at Living Cities, and
Mm.
took that with me into law school.
Where did you grow up, Sunitha? Just for fun.
Yeah, fun fact, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
so
So
Steeler
so
country.
yeah, so no Sailor Country. Yeah, good. NFC. No, AFC. So no shortage, right? In the Pittsburgh area. Certainly, a Steel City, Gateway City, a city that has definitely seen a rise and fall with the fact that it's been industrial. So you certainly were exposed to a lot of, I'm sure, marginalized communities, different types of economic advantage and disadvantage growing up in a city like Pittsburgh.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were lucky that my parents didn't sort of insulate us from all of
Yeah.
that.
No, that's great that they
Um,
exposed you to that. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
definitely exposed us to that. And they, also they didn't grow up with a lot either in
Mm,
India. And so
mm.
when they came to this country, they were very scrappy and really came not a lot, but
Yeah.
definitely a drive and a motivation to improve their lot in life, and also use that advantage and the privilege of an opportunity that they had to come here to give back to anyone they could.
I think that's so remarkable too, Sunitha, because when you talk about community building or philanthropy, so often the people that are on the forefront of that and are driving that are individuals who they themselves, right, are coming up from something. They themselves were often marginalized, but they don't look at this as something that is, like, well, I just have to worry about me, right? It's so much more than just than that. And I can hear in what you're saying these kind of pivotal moments in your life that have shaped this approach to you coming from a background like that.
Absolutely. And I think, in a lot of ways it's about taking bets on people, and
Yeah.
honestly, the US government took a bet on my parents, allowing them to
Sure.
come to this country
Sure.
and giving them the opportunity to finish their medical training here,
Mm,
and an opportunity to develop a career here and start a family here. And you see that over and over again in entrepreneurs that end up going in taking a more philanthropic route to their work.
sure.
They're essentially taking their privilege of getting that opportunity, or someone took a bet on them, and
Right.
they see it as their way to sort of give back.
Pay it
And
back. Yeah, or pay it forward or pay it back, however you want to play it. Like this notion of impact entrepreneurship. Love
that's
to talk to you about the Buffalo Initiative. How the idea came about, Sunitha, is very interesting to me, and sort of then I can surmise based upon what you've just told us about your rearing and your education and your work as an attorney. But sort of, what further, I guess, drove you to kind of focus on this mission of improving economic outcomes in sort of historically marginalized communities? But first of all, the idea of the Buffalo Initiative, where did that stem from?
Yeah, so I was working, after law school, kind of did the traditional route of going and working in a large law firm.
Mhm.
Felt like it was a great training ground to
Oh,
understand
sure.
the practice of law and really dig into certain legal concepts that I thought would be really important for me to understand as I developed my career. So I worked at a large law firm in the private investment funds space and
Mhm.
started to learn how to build funds, how to represent clients going into funds, and really got a crash course in that world.
Yeah.
And then I ended up leaving that to work at Georgetown Law School and helped run their their social enterprise and
Right.
nonprofit law clinic. And
Right.
so we were representing sort of social entrepreneurs, nonprofits that were doing mission oriented work. And then I, just sort of really love that work, and I love being close to that social change work. But along the way, I had a daughter who was diagnosed while I was teaching at Georgetown Law with a rare pediatric neurological condition caused by a change in her gene called CACNA1A.
Mm.
And so when we got that diagnosis, my world was kind of turned
Everything changed.
completely up.
Yeah.
Everything
In an
changed. My
instant, I'm
world,
sure. Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
Mostly because, not because she got the diagnosis per se, but because there were no options after that diagnosis. The doctor gave us the diagnosis, said that there were no specific treatment options available, and we didn't really know what this would mean for her life. And
Sure.
that was sort of mind-boggling to me,
Yeah.
that this day and age in the practice of
The
medicine,
best they could offer you was a sorry, we don't have anything to offer you.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we gave you an answer but no solution.
Right.
And as someone who's sort of always thinking about, how do we, not just the problems, not just identifying problems, but how do we develop solutions for these really intractable problems in the world? And that sort of was
Mm.
my upbringing, and was what I did, after college. Like, how do we develop solutions in this space? So I started working in the patient advocacy space with the CACNA1A Foundation, which primarily is focused on finding solutions for this problem, which is, there are no treatments. How do we get treatments to this community?
Sure.
And so for the last 4 years, I've been helping lead that foundation, and have
Outstanding.
seen incredible challenges in
Mm,
developing treatments in this space because of the ecosystem around drug development, academic research, translational research, all of the players that are sort of working in their own silos. I started
mhm.
to identify these problems. And of course, once you identify a problem, you can't stop there. You've
You
got
need
to
to find
identify
the
a solution.
solution. Yeah, yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's what the Buffalo Initiative was really born out of is the identification of these problems, not only for CACNA1A related disorders and research associated with that, but
Right.
all rare diseases.
Sure.
And how do we develop a solution to that that will change the ecosystem, that will improve research and actually development of treatments for these diseases that aren't happening right now? And so happy to get into more about what the Buffalo Initiative actually is, but it really was born out of that
Yeah.
being in the trenches on the CACNA1A and seeing these problems apply to all sorts of diseases.
And I think that's a really great segue because, now you've certainly done an amazing job of kind of telling us the genesis and setting the table for us. And gosh, I'm just sitting here, and it's so remarkable your tenacity towards problem solving. I really come to appreciate that, and now at hearing you talk about what you're trying to do. But let's talk for a minute about, sort of like the mission of the Buffalo Initiative.
Yeah, so the Buffalo Initiative is really an effort to essentially bring about a focus on translational research, which means research focused on improving this basic science and translating it to the clinic, so to
Mm.
real humans,
Yep.
in a way that is community driven and community responsive. And so what that means really in lay terms is making sure that we are investing in science that has the potential to impact real lives, that are the focus of, the diseases that we're working on,
Sure.
and so bring treatments to people in a way that's responsive to what they need and what they want to see in the world.
It sounds to me, Sunitha, and please, if I'm mischaracterizing this, please correct me. But it sounds to me what you're doing is you're doing that like hand to hand, very very transactional, very hand to hand combat type on the ground work. What I'm hearing you say here, it's very impactful because it's so targeted and so close to the ground.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge right now in science, in drug development, in a lot of the spaces that this rare disease ecosystem works in, these efforts are completely disconnected from the communities that are living with these
Mm,
challenges. And
mhm.
what we really need to do is develop an ecosystem that brings to the forefront and really focuses on, in a very patient centric or community centric way,
Yeah.
the challenges that people are living with. It's not good enough to sort of just fund science to fund science for that sake. We
Right.
need to fund science that has the potential to really impact human lives. And we are focused on that actual mission. We really want to make sure we bring as many of these promising treatments that are kind of been developed in academic labs into the clinic.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we're doing it with the communities that really want this to happen for them.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the insight there into sort of the day-to-day operations here, right? And I thank you for telling me how the values of what you're doing manifest into those into those sort of day-to-day operations. You mentioned a little bit about some of the, the research, the drug companies, this translational research, researchers themselves. I'm sure partnerships play a huge role here, right? In you achieving your success, your goals and objectives. But Sunitha, how do you identify sort of the right collaborators for you at the Buffalo Initiative?
Yeah, none of this work would be possible without partnerships.
Hmm.
And I think that's so critical. Right now, we really want to be a hub,
Yeah,
and really develop a hub, kind of hub and spoke model, or however you want to, the image you want to sort of have in your mind. But
sure.
Buffalo Initiative is essentially going to set the agenda for the entire process, right? So
Hmm.
we are going to partner with patient advocacy groups or patient groups that are focused on developing treatments for their community on the one end.
Hmm.
In the middle, we're sort of also working with foundations, philanthropists, impact investors to bring their investment networks to this work.
Yeah.
And then we're also bringing the resources and tools to essentially enable groups to take that drug development program forward. So contract research organizations, regulatory expertise, technical experts that can help sort of take the promising drug development program forward. And then on the final end of this is the commercial partner. So the biotech companies, commercial investors that are interested in essentially driving forward the program through clinical trials and ultimately commercialization and approval. So it's the entire ecosystem that's being built out with the organizing mechanism being Buffalo Initiative, because right now all of these players are working in the space in their individual silos. They're not working together, including the individual patient advocacy groups, right? It's really hard for us to think about how developments in one disease area can apply to other disease areas. And so I think
because you get a little focused on that one specific disease, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there are these sort of ad hoc ways that we're sharing information all the time and collaborating and thinking about, oh, could this work for my friend who's leading this organization? But really, we need a systematic way to sort of identify patterns and capture that knowledge so that we can apply things in a more efficient and accelerated way, because these patients don't have time to wait. They're really, at the end of the day, there's a huge unmet need. Kids are suffering and they're desperate for better treatments.
I really appreciate what you just said, Sunitha, because in my mind, you talked about the hub and spoke model, or however it kind of transcends in your own conscience as you're telling it. What I heard was really this sort of like front door model, right? Where Buffalo Initiative is the front door. And you've got patient advocacy groups and research foundations like CACNA 1A, for example. You've got the social impact investors, the CROs, the regulatory bodies, those that are further along in the sort of transverse of discovery and are closer to commercialization and sort of biopharma companies. And I see you guys as like, you're the front door to that, right? Is that a fair assessment, Sunitha?
I like that. I haven't thought about it in that way, but I think that's right. We're sort of opening the door for all of these players to work together.
Yeah.
In a collaborative way, as opposed to sort of a one-off way. Yeah, we're providing front door, we're providing the platform, and obviously the off ramp as well. I think it's a great image to keep in mind.
I'm sure there's no shortages of challenges here, Sunitha, right? And you seem to me like the type of person who pivots challenges into opportunities. I have no doubt in my mind there. But talk to me a little bit about, what are some of the biggest challenges that the Buffalo Initiative has faced, and how are you kind of pivoting those into, or navigating those, I guess, into opportunities for you folks?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here that I think are really big challenges that the Buffalo Initiative is trying to tackle head on. We didn't get a chance to talk about the concept of buffalo and why buffalo for diseases, but
do that.
Buffalo, the saying goes that buffalo are one of the only animals in the animal kingdom that when they see rain clouds or storm approaching, they don't run away, they don't hide, they actually face the storm head on and charge right through it.
Yeah.
And that's what these community groups are doing. They're really buffalo charging these rare disease diagnoses and storms that they're facing head on.
Right.
And they're doing it in a way that's fearless and undaunted, because they are the one actor in this entire system that has the most to lose, but also the most to gain, right? Their loved one is directly impacted.
Absolutely.
And so what we're doing in terms of the challenges that these individual groups are facing, and really why the Buffalo Initiative exists, is because one of the biggest challenges in this space, obviously, as you can imagine, is fundraising.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for foundations, philanthropists, impact investors to distinguish CACNA 1A from any other genetic condition. Mm-hmm. And so from an investment perspective, they don't know the science. It's hard to dig into really all of the minutia of each genetic disease. There's 10,000 of them out there.
So many. How could they? Right.
How could they? Yeah. So how do you provide? One of the challenges is, right, like just making that decision to invest and providing capital for this type of work. So how do you provide a platform for philanthropists or impact investors or investors in general to play in this space in a way that doesn't require them to know the minutia of every single drug development program. That's one.
That's important. Yeah.
That's really important, because
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, when you go to fundraise from these foundations and philanthropies, their number one thing that they've said to me is, look, the only people approaching us with multi-million-dollar ideas in this space are academic institutions.
Yeah.
That's the only player that's saying
Right.
you can do something with multi-million-dollars to impact disease research or clinical research.
Mm-hmm.
We need another platform, right? Because academic research is wonderful and it's
Right.
necessary in this, but it's not the only way to try to develop treatments. And in fact, they're the least effective in it, because that's not what they're set up to do. They're not incentivized to do that translational work. And so we need another platform that can accept multi-million-dollar investments and still be able to carry off this work,
drive forward this transactional research,
exactly. And so we're building a platform, an actual fund, to be able to accept that. We're trying to raise now, $25 million to launch the first 5 investments we're going to make in pediatric neurological disease research. And that's what we're building. The second sort of main problem that I see is a marketing challenge, and that ties to fundraising, right? But we need to understand that rare disease is not actually all that rare. It affects a lot of people. And so when you're thinking about where to put your dollars, oftentimes, these big investors or these big foundations and philanthropies, they want to invest in big problems and big ideas.
Right.
And rare disease, as a name itself implies, is that it's rare.
It's rare.
It doesn't impact that many people.
The impact is perceived to not be as great. Yes.
That's exactly right. And so how do we create an opportunity that allows them to understand the breadth and gravity of this problem, where they feel like their investment actually will impact a lot of people? Because it's true, even if you're investing in one single disease research program at a time, or ones that impact a handful at a time, depending on what you're looking at in terms of the portfolio opportunity, the fact of the matter is, this is where medicine is headed. This is where clinical research is heading. It's heading towards personalized
precision medicine. Absolutely.
Precision medicine.
Yep.
We need to be able to get this right, and we need the money to do it correctly. And so we're able to now tell a story that's bigger than any one genetic disease or one disorder. We're telling a story about a portfolio of diseases that, if we can get this right, this is actually going to impact the entire field, and it's going to change the way the ecosystem works. We're not just investing in one stakeholder to get the work done. We're actually investing in the entire process, from patient group to commercialization, and we're doing it so that we're all rowing in the same direction across an agenda that matters to the entire community.
I like what you said there about how you're taking and tying this together, Sunitha, from what people will perceive as just, well, that disease only affects 1,000 people worldwide, so why would I invest in that, right? To the notion of this is a gateway to precision medicine, and people are starting to get more excited about precision medicine, right? And personalized medicine and gene therapy, and certainly some of the work we've seen now with decoding and genetic sequencing. And I think, when you start to build that story, right, and the idea that most medicine as we move forward will be precision-based medicine, it gets so much more compelling. And I really appreciate what you said there about the broader theme. But I know myself from being in this space, it's hard, right? It's hard to get people to see that, what you're exemplifying in terms of the broader theme here, not just sort of the focus of, that one disease, that one particular patient cohort, right?
Yes, you're exactly right. I mean, I think this is exactly where we're headed, and you don't necessarily know that as an outsider unless you or your loved one, or you just know the space, has been impacted by any given disease. So
sure.
Even cancer right now, right? We talk about, breast cancer or whatever cancer out there. But at the end of the day, when you go and get that diagnosis, they're actually going down into the genetics, understanding the very specific type of cancer you have, and they're treating it accordingly. But we have not yet translated that sort of mechanism to other types of large diseases yet, although we're starting to.
Right.
think this approach of like taking umbrella diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and drilling down to the genetics
Sure.
is the way we're doing it. But the rare disease space already has the genetic
Right.
mechanism. We already have identified the gene,
Right.
and now we're
You're
going
already
on
at
from
the
there.
genetic level. Yeah. Yeah. You just need the investment, to your point, you know.
Yes.
Well, that's not all you need, but it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was teasing you a little bit at the beginning of the conversation about, did you get everything done for 2024? Did you check off everything? And obviously, and you mentioned the fund and the ambition that you have around the fund that you're raising right now. What are some of the other sort of, key goals for the Buffalo Initiative as you kind of turn into the new year?
Yeah, so we've laid out a few milestones that we're planning to work towards in 2025. We're lucky that we have some initial investment from a philanthropy right now to just sort of develop the infrastructure of the organization and really build out the fund infrastructure and start doing some large scale fundraising around it and developing the quite frankly, the prospectus around the opportunities that exist in the space. And so that's what we're doing right now is we're bringing on some folks to help identify the opportunities. We're building out the sort of the investment advisory team around the opportunity. And then we're just boots to the ground fundraising to try to raise the money to deploy the capital by the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. So we're going to see a lot of growth and a lot of 2025. We have an ambitious vision set out to really go from sort of idea, initial angel investor to really raise the money we need to start operationalizing.
Yeah, much more of an institutional sort of approach, right, Sunitha? Yeah. That's outstanding. I'd love to change gears a little bit to some of your personal reflections, Sunitha. You mentioned this is a very personal thing for you, right? And you talked about how this stemmed from your childhood. Your parents instilled this in you. You talked a little bit about being, the parent of a rare disease child. A lot of people are very passionate about the things that they can't translate sometimes that passion into some of the actionable things that you've been able to do. And I would just love to hear a little bit about how you've been able to translate that, if you can articulate it, how you've been able to take the passion and the emotion and really kind of translate that into something that is addressing disparities in the way that you folks are doing.
Yeah, I think one of the most remarkable things that I've seen along this journey is the fortitude and determination and resiliency, sense of urgency of the parents whose children get this exact same diagnosis, or rare disease diagnosis, and heard the same words I did, which is that there's nothing that exists.
Right.
And, as a parent, I think anyone can relate to, or even just a loved one, getting a diagnosis, hearing that there's nothing that can be done, and that just not being acceptable. And so all of the entrepreneurs, I call them rare disease entrepreneurs, parent entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call them.
What they are. Yeah.
They have essentially decided that the risk is too great to do nothing at all. And so regardless of their skill set, and often these leaders have so many skill sets. They may not be in drug development, but they've run businesses elsewhere.
Sure.
They've tackled challenges in other professional careers. Sure. They get the diagnosis and they're like, I'm going to just do whatever I can to figure this out. They don't have imposter syndrome necessarily because they don't have that luxury. This is their child.
Right.
And so I felt like the same thing here. How could it be that this day and age, with the scientific tools that we have that exist today, that no one is working on finding a treatment for this disease? I actually just didn't believe it.
You couldn't believe it. Yeah. Your mind wouldn't allow you to believe it. Yeah.
Right. And for a lot of these genes these diseases that have been discovered, it's been 10, 20 years that the genes has been discovered as a disease causing mechanism. And the research is still stuck back in a place where we aren't using any of it to develop new therapies, new treatments. So It was really, I think, an opportunity for all of us in this position to look at the problem with fresh
Hmm.
eyes, with a
Hmm.
sense of urgency, with a
Right.
sense of that that the fact that this is quote unquote impossible is
Possible.
not okay. We
Right.
we have to figure this out. There's no other choice. And so all of us, I think, have that very personal mission and drive to find better solutions because there's no one else doing it. And if we don't do it, no one else will. And that's what's driven us to just figure things out. A lot of us have never, run an organization, set up a website, set up social media accounts for an organization. We're doing it all, right? We're doing the
Yeah, you
fundraising,
have to. Yeah.
learning the research, we're digging into PubMed, reading every article we can, talking to researchers, inspiring them to work on things that matter to our communities, and building really robust and professional ways of doing this work. And I think it's because we were left with no other option. It's really remarkable, actually, to hear the stories of these. And I know you've heard so many of these
Mhm.
stories and talked to so many leaders in this space, but it's really inspiring. And they, no matter how hard any given day gets, you always are just sort of refueled by talking to others, because we're
That
all
drives
in
you.
the same boat.
Yeah. And I so appreciate what you said too about, you're running websites, you're building nonprofits, you're finding, but also you're educating an investment community. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, doesn't it, Sunitha, of the things that you're having to do.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and honestly, like, I've worked in a lot of high pressure,
Yeah.
long
Oh
hour
yeah, you've been
jobs,
large law firms. Yeah, I'm sure there were lots of pressure to produce, to bill hours, to do all kinds of things, right?
but I've never worked, I think, more tirelessly in my
Mm.
life for less pay or no pay at all in some cases, to do this work, because I think at the end of the day, like, the investment is our children,
Yeah.
and we really need to make sure that they are in a position. We can do all that we can during our lifetime to make sure they're positioned, to reach their full potential and to not be a burden on the rest of the family or society. And that's really the driving force, is trying to do this quickly
Mm.
and as efficiently as possible in the time that we've got.
As you think a little bit, Sunitha, about your role now, you mentioned paid, not paid. It's a lot, and kind of the things the question, I guess the question that was forming in my mind as you were talking about all of that is, this has to have changed you from where you started to where you are now. And I guess I'm most interested in how it's changed you as a leader. Sunitha, you are leading a tremendous effort here. And I know you have a team that helps you. Of course, no one does this alone. But I'm kind of curious about when you think about what your leadership style maybe was like when you were working as an attorney, right? And what your leadership style is today, and how's that sort of evolved, through your work with the Buffalo Initiative? Do you feel like you've changed as a leader?
Yeah, I think you have to in this
Mm.
in this work, right? Things
Yeah.
We're constantly evolving, your situations are constantly evolving, the stakes are different,
Yeah.
right? So as an attorney, you're representing a client and you're doing your best job to represent their interests, and making sure you're dotting all the I's, crossing
Right.
all the T's in that world. And having the confidence to be able to advise clients is a very much a leadership type skill. But when you start to actually go to run an organization, you're building out things from scratch. That infrastructure doesn't exist, that
Yeah.
did exist for me going into a law
Sure.
firm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to essentially, with not a lot of resources, garner the confidence and the passion of other people to sort of carry out the vision that you have
Mm.
and the mission that you've set forth in ways that, I think, are incredibly different
Sure.
than being a professional in another space. This is really personal,
Yeah.
and so it's really hard to sort of give up, that focus and that drive, and it's hard to inspire people who may not have a loved one affected that are still integral to the mission.
Sure.
Telling that story, getting really personal, is not something that I was ever familiar with doing in the legal world, because it was very just
Sure.
disconnected from my life. It was just a
Right.
skill set I developed and I was
Right.
applying it.
Right.
This is really about a story and
Mm.
imparting the sense of urgency that we have as parents to drive leadership, and drive a group of people to partner with you, whether that be an academic institution, a commercial partner, a biotech
CRO.
executive.
Yeah.
They're essentially doing this work because that's the chosen field that they've
Mm,
wanted to go in their whole life or part of their career. They've made that active choice. The
yeah.
parents and leaders of these organizations did not. They were thrust into this world.
Right. Just thrust into it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in some ways, that drives a different type of leadership that
Hmm.
is very personal, and it makes it a very vulnerable position to be in ways that it was never that way in other parts of my career.
I can imagine when you feel like you have no choice, right? Because inaction is just not a choice in this, right? It's just not an option, if you will, right?
That's
Uh,
exactly right.
yeah.
And so that's the reason why I think about this 24/7. I
Right.
work all the time on this, and you can't turn it off because it is so personal, and I don't
Sure.
know that if this was just like a regular job that it would be the same way, but it's infused, and that's how I see the world now, is everything through this lens. And where are there opportunities, where potential partnerships exist. Every time I meet a new person, it's like you want to tell them this story that mixes both your personal life as well as your professional life, and it's just a very different way of like going about your day.
Speaking of which, as you envision, not just your day-to-day life, but sort of the looking forward and envisioning, I guess, Sunitha, the legacy of this work, of your work, of the institute's work, what would you say you hope for the most?
What I hope for the most is really clear. I don't ever want a family to go through what we did, which
Hmm.
is you get a diagnosis, and on the other end is there's no option for
Right.
your
It's
child
just,
or loved one.
yeah, void. Yeah.
We need to change the
Mm,
paradigm so that the system is not failing like it is right now for rare disease families. We
right.
need to get treatments into the clinic, and
Hmm.
we need to get them accessible to families no matter where they are, because we have the scientific tools. They exist today to solve these diseases, but the actual
Undoubtedly.
business models don't exist. The
Don't support it.
financing doesn't support it.
Yeah.
And the diagnostic process right now is still not identifying enough of these families quickly enough. And so,
Sure.
for all these reasons, we hope that the way we are approaching this problem through the Buffalo Initiative and through community led translational research, we hope that this will actually change the ecosystem in a way that changes the end result of a family getting a diagnosis and the doctor saying, here are your options.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you about the pros and cons of each of these options. And that's what they go home with, is a decision they have to make about which treatment to start, as opposed to having to start this entire process of finding an answer, developing a solution themselves.
All on
It's
their
not
own.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank God for folks like you that started that, started the work that you did on your own first, right? So now that others don't have to do it on their own, which
We hope.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful sort of full circle to where we began our conversation. Let's call people to action, Sunitha. What can they do to support not only the Buffalo Initiative, but just sort of contribute to this community? What can folks do?
Yeah, I think number one is get educated. There are so many groups out there besides the Buffalo Initiative and the CACNA1A Foundation that are doing incredible, life-changing work in the rare disease space.
Hmm.
I would encourage you to look at any one of these organizations and understand why the way they're doing this work is more impactful than any other single actor in the system, and invest there. Put your dollars there. Support them. Share their posts. Share their stories with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
I
Drive
think
awareness. Yeah.
drive awareness,
Hmm.
exactly. It's really, really important. I think the second sort of call to action is really trying to make sure we bring philanthropies, foundations, government funding to the space in a way that is not just investing in one given researcher or one given project. We
Hmm.
need to develop an ecosystem that is focused on a solution, like treatments to people, not
Absolutely.
just
Yep.
advancing incremental science.
Hmm.
We need to be bold in how we invest in this problem. And so Buffalo Initiative is the perfect platform to be able to take those opportunities. And we hope that we'll get more of those sort of big, bold funders on board and change the way that investments are made in the rare disease ecosystem.
And I know you will. I absolutely know that you will. Sunitha, thank you so much. Sunitha Malepati, the Buffalo Initiative, thank you for your time today. We wish you the best of luck, and we look so forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome.